In this tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to use the Sketchpad app. It's sketchpad.app. It's a really cool app because it has a ton of different types of brushes or stamps that you could use to create texture within your artwork. So what we are going to do first is we are going to create a new board. You always want to start by creating something so that you know what size you're making it. 6,000 pixels by 6,000 pixels, that's a lot. I tried to do 3,000 pixels before and imported it into Photoshop and saved it. I had saved it with 300 DPIs and it ended up being 41 inches. And so you got to think about how big you would print out your artwork, and would you print it out 41 inches big or not? And so for this one, we're going to just do 2,000 pixels by 2,000 pixels, should be plenty. And we're going to choose a blank background and click create. Now we are only seeing a portion of this canvas, and so you want to zoom out, but if you go Control minus, notice how it's making this toolbar smaller. If I go Control plus, it makes it larger, and that's kind of annoying. So when you do this, you want to make sure that you go over here to the magnifying glass and you're zooming in and out using this so that your toolbar isn't affected. And then drag it up until you see the whole entire thing. So keep zooming out. And there we go. Now we can see our entire canvas and not just a piece of it. A big mistake would be to just start drawing, and then you think you're doing a really nice drawing, but you're only on a portion of the canvas, and when you save it, it's going to be this tiny little drawing up on the top side of the canvas, and it's not going to be that high of quality. So zoom out. The other things that you need to be aware of are your tools. So you have your paint bucket tool, your text box. Here's where all of your shapes are, and this is where all of your brush tools are going to be. This icon will change depending on what type of brush you're using, and so will the shape tool. So right now it has a star, but if you choose something else like a rectangle, then it'll be a rectangle. It will be whatever you chose last. I'm also going to look at my settings, and I want to make sure that I'm not quite sure where they save your stuff. It just happens to be there every time I sign back in. And so I want you to save a backup in your Google Drive. So turn that on so that it is available to you. And then sign on using your school account. And allow, and allow, just so we can be sure that we know where copies would be if we need it in the future. And let's look at everything else. Yes, we want it to autosave just in case your computer crashes, and that all looks pretty good. So the other thing is, if you need a crop or if you need to select anything, you can go here. Your layers are located off to this side. And so right now all we have is a background. And unfortunately, this is going to make a ton of layers, and each layer is editable, but you can't really merge the layers into one single layer, and we'll get into that later. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to try to shade in a sphere using a little bit of help. So let's go ahead and click on the shape tool, and we're going to click on the circle. And we don't want to have any fill, so to get rid of a fill, you click on that eyedropper and we say no, but we do want to have an outline, so that's fine. And you're going to start your circle in the middle of this canvas and drag it out. Drag it out kind of big. And then what we want to do is we want to fill in behind it, because we're going to use that fill to be like a mask to clean up our messy edges in this tutorial. So I want the fill to be just a solid, I want it to be pixels, pixel fill. and then I want it to be just a solid color. And so let's do just a gray. There we go. Now we're going to start experimenting with texture. That's going to be a nice mark for our future expressive portrait project. And I'm going to click on the stamp tool, and this is where I'm going to try to figure out what kind of stamp I want. Your brush tools in this one are located, let's see, if you click on stamp up here, you can experiment with a bunch of different types of brushes. So these are all available. I like this web tool. You can make it look like spray paint or fur, but in this tutorial, I'm going to practice with a stamp. And when you click on it, it'll give you tons of options. Let's see. Oh, I guess you click on stamp and then you go down here to get your different options. And whatever you click on, when it stamps, it's going to change the size of it and it's going to rotate it around, and you can change all of that. So if you don't want it to rotate at all, you can say I don't want it to rotate as you stamp it down on there. So this is the one that I've chosen, but you can see huge variety of things that you could choose from. So that's the one I want to go with. And right now it's really large, and I could use that to kind of cover up some of the white in my canvas. And notice how I'm going outside of the edges. So if this was the actual project, you probably don't want to have your edges get that messy, so you would really change the scale down. But right now I'm just trying to get rid of that white background. Just do a ton of them. So that gray shape that I have in the background, I'm going to bring that layer up to the front, and that's going to really chop off all of these messy edges. But in the actual project, you might not get that option. And so that's where I would have scaled down quite a bit, and I would have just been really careful around my edges to make sure that I'm not going outside of the edges quite that much. So that will be the challenge if you choose something like this. That's a long, skinny shape trying to stay inside of the lines. And then I want this to look like a sphere, and so I need to have a light side, a shadow edge, and all of that. And so I'm going to change my color. I can go all the way to white if I want to, but then that's kind of hard to control, because if I'm trying to do that light side right here, it's just hard to feather it out. So I could either use, instead of white, I can use like a value 1 or 2 or 3, or I could change my opacity. And so I want to show you what that would look like instead. So instead of 90%, so the more opaque something is, the more solid it is. So when we take this opacity down to like 20, let's say, it's going to be more transparent. So I'm going to increase the size so this doesn't take me forever. And it you can see how it's a little bit easier to feather and blend when you take that transparency down. The more times I go over it, the whiter and whiter it's going to look in these different areas. So you got to decide, are you using lighter colors, or are you going to use transparency when you're blending everything in? And so right back here, we need to have reflected light. So I'm going to come back in, add a little bit more. I don't really like how I can see the white back here on my sphere, so I might go back in with some black, and it could be transparent, or I can just add that thicker coat. But I really want to get rid of that little holes of white showing through. And so there would be where my reflected light is. My shadow edge is located right here. And if there was a table here, light bounces off the table, and it makes this part of the sphere just a little bit lighter. Okay, I'm going to take some of this transparent black. Now, the downside of the transparency is it's making everything look a little bit fuzzy. And so if you want things to be really crisp, then don't do transparency. You can change color instead. So I'm going to go ahead and continue with the transparency because that's what I started. And I think I want it to be higher. Let's go 50. And I want to feather out this dark value 5. I'm kind of making a 4, then a 3, and notice how I go all the way around. Okay. And I'm going to go back in and I'm going to add my lights again. Okay, anything that doesn't look good, I'm just trying to fix that up. Oops. And then I'm going to go with white, and it's 50% transparency right now. Just feather that in. Then I can go maybe less, because this is kind of jumping. I have it really light, and then it's kind of dark there, so I can take this back down to 20%. Just kind of feather that nicely around. Okay, maybe get a little bit brighter. Embrace all the way up to almost a value 0. And then kind of look at it for any jumps. Maybe just a little bit there. If you don't like something, you go Control Z and it just removes it. And you can do that several times. I don't know how many Control Z's you get on this program, so you might not want to go too crazy. So, but it does give you several. Now, if this was the actual project, these messy lines will be an issue because I had them way too big, right? And I'm really breaking the border. But on this one, I'm going to show you a quick trick. Because we did that mask at the beginning, I can take my pixel fill and I can drag it all the way back up to the top. And then there we go. We have our nice sphere, nice and clean. The other thing that you can do with this program, like let's say that I wanted to group all of these stamps together. Because right now, if you notice when I click on each one, it's a different layer, which helps us save it in higher quality because these are all editable layers. They're all live lines. But if I wanted these to be in their own folder, I think I hold down Shift. So I clicked on that one, I hold down Shift and I click on that one. It highlights it all. And then I can just group those together. And so that can help you keep your layers a little bit cleaner so you know what's in there. Now when it comes to saving this, so you would go through and finesse it. I probably would go back and I would work on, it looks like I kind of missed a little bit of stuff here. I might come back and add a little bit more of my shadow edge. This looks kind of jumpy there, but you can finesse yours. You'll have more time to do that. I don't want to take up too much of your time. And then, so this is how we started. This is if you want to open any images or anything that you've done in the past. And here is where we're going to save it. So once you're completely done, you're going to go to Export. And then you have options of how you want to save it. And if you're worried about things crashing, at the end of every day that you work on it, you can go download Sketchpad and save the actual Sketchpad file. Once you save it as a JPEG or a PNG or anything like that, it's going to merge all the layers together and you won't be able to edit them later on. The app itself should save it. You are saving that copy in your Google Drive, but it should automatically be here when you open up the app again. So I can click on download and it gives me all of the options and more control on how to save it. If you just clicked on one of these, who knows how it's saving it exactly? So you want more control, so you're going to go to download. And I'm going to just save it as a JPEG. If I wanted a transparent background, which doesn't apply here, you would save it as a PNG. The higher the dots per inch, the better the resolution. So right now, 300 dots per inch is high definition. And we want it to be its normal size, and then we can click on download. and then give it a second. This is where I always get impatient. I'm like, did I click it? Did I not? And then it'll say download complete. And then I always go show in folder. I want to see where did it save it. And it is right here. So you would take that and this is what you would upload into Google Classroom. And so you could always click and you can drag it into your drive if you want to, but right now it's inside of your downloads folder. So when you go to attach this JPEG in Google Classroom, you would go to and find it inside of your files, download folder, and then attach the JPEG image. But it does save it. It's 6.5 megabyte JPEG. Open it up. We can look at the quality of it. It's going to be pretty good. And so I can go ahead and try to zoom in. And you can see when I'm really zoomed in, you can see all these little fibers inside of the artwork. And so that's perfect. That's how I want it to be. And then you're done with your practice. Let me close that out. Close this out. If you want to start another artwork, you would just go to new and then start the next artwork. And that is it for this tutorial.